Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today as we have an exciting presentation planned about how to choose heart-healthy foods today. And my name is Veronica. I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm co-presenting today with my registered dietitian colleague Fatim that I work with at the Toronto Rehab Institute Cardiac Rehab Program at the University Health Network. Today's objectives are simple. We plan to discuss foods that are heart healthy and should be included in your eating patterns. Now, if you've watched the previous webinars, you're aware we have ground rules. The ground rules include that this session is for education only. The presentation should last around 25 minutes, leaving 10 minutes to answer your questions at the end. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a box like the one featured here to ask your questions. There'll be a little icon that says Q&A. So feel free to use this icon to write your questions as we go through today's session, and we'll answer the questions at the end. When you do submit a question, just to let you know, we will answer questions generally. And if you want more specific answers for your situation, we ask that you follow up with your registered dietitian or healthcare professional. We will also be using the chat icon today, which is located next to the Q&A icon. And we encourage your participation in today's session. And in order to do that, we ask that you provide your comments to the questions that we ask in that chat box. So I hope that makes sense. If you have questions for us, use the Q&A icon. And when you want to provide comments to our questions that we ask, use the chat icon. And if we don't have enough time to answer all the questions today that you submitted, we encourage you to link back to our website, cardiaccollege.ca, and we will have written answers to all of the submitted questions, which will be posted there within 48 hours. Great. So now that we're done with the formalities, again, I want to thank you for joining us and welcome you to today's session. If you recall, last Wednesday, we discussed a variety of healthy eating patterns that have good evidence to improve heart disease risk factors like lowering cholesterol, blood pressure, and blood sugar. They all have similarities and differences. We discussed that the best diet pattern for you is one that you can see yourself following in the long term. So I hope you have a chance to try to incorporate the principles discussed last week, or even had the chance to score yourself using that Mediterranean diet score tool that's located on our website. Now, before we jump into specific heart healthy foods, we want to quickly review those 3 heart healthy patterns of eating. So what pattern is this presented on the slide here? And this is where I'll invite you to use that chat function to type your answers to let me know what this pattern is and what do you remember about it. So if you can go ahead and do that, I'll just wait a moment. Great. I have a response of that it's the Mediterranean diet pattern, and that's absolutely right. Does anyone remember anything about this specific pattern? Or anything come to mind? Olive oil and red wine, definitely. It's very Mediterranean. Great. Thank you for the person who commented that this pattern of eating isn't just about what we eat, but how we're eating. So eating with people, absolutely. And another comment about lots of vegetables, less meat. So instead of meat, this pattern of eating suggests, including more fish and plant-based proteins like legumes more often. Absolutely. Choose fish or meat and poultry over red meat. Definitely. So that's another great comment. Good. I think that touches on the basics, that we're including more plants, right? So that's your fruits, your vegetables, whole grains, but also those plant-based proteins, right? In order to reduce that red meat, we do want to include more protein from plants as well. And then it was also mentioned in the chat here that it does emphasize choosing healthy fats like that olive oil, but also nuts and seeds regularly. That's great. Thank you very much for contributing. So we'll go to the next pattern here. Now another question, what is this eating pattern? Do you remember it from last week? And so what is it called, and what does this one emphasize? So if you could use the chat box to let me know. I don't see any responses. Do you remember what this pattern of eating focuses on? Oh, I have a response. Canada's Food Guide. No, this isn't actually Canada's Food Guide. The new Canada's Food Guide that came out about a year ago is actually a plate. So that is Canada's Food Guide. This one here is called the DASH Dietary Pyramid. So thank you for that comment. Remember that DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And so that's just a fancy way of saying it's a dietary pattern that helps to reduce our blood pressure. Great, and a comment here, I would say this is a vegetarian, but there's fish, and that's right. So this pattern of eating does focus on including more plants, but it specifically focuses on including specific minerals. So one of the minerals it emphasizes is making sure that we're having enough magnesium, which is found in plant-based proteins like nuts and legumes. And remember, those legumes are things like black beans, chickpeas, and lentils. This dietary pattern also makes sure that you are including enough calcium. So that's why you see the low-fat dairy. Also emphasizes the plant-based dairy products, but your leafy greens, and then your fish. So canned salmon with bones is a good source of calcium. And the other mineral it makes sure that you are getting adequate amounts of is potassium, which is found in a variety of plant foods. So your vegetables, your fruits, your nuts, your seeds, your whole grains, and it's also rich in the dairy products as well. So overall, this pattern of eating is also lower in sodium, and that's because it emphasizes eating more plant foods and whole foods, right? So less processed foods will make sure that you're having lower sodium overall. That's great. And the last pattern of eating, I'll say, what is this pattern of eating and what does it emphasize? But I see here that it's written on the top there that it is the vegetarian and vegan diet pyramid, so I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have included that one, or I shouldn't have included the title. But what does it emphasize? Any comments about this pyramid that may be different or similar? Please use the chat box now if you can. Okay, I don't see any comments about the vegetarian. Oh, good. I have two. Oh, lots of vegetables, definitely, and then an emphasis on fruits and vegetables. No red meat, yes. And the vegetarian and vegan pattern actually includes no meat at all, no animal meat. And then another comment, which is great, that also talks about how to eat, right? To be active, to enjoy eating with others or try to eat with others, cook at home more often, and again, emphasizes those vegetables and fruit. Awesome. Thank you very much for contributing there. So the vegetarian and vegan pyramid here does encourage you to choose more foods from plants. And remember, that's not just our fruits and vegetables, but it also is our whole grains, our nuts and seeds, our fats. So olive oil, avocados are there as well. And the last two pyramids did discuss eating more fish. And instead, or I guess I should say, we emphasize eating more fish because of the healthy omega-3s that are found in fish. If you're looking at the vegetarian and vegan pyramid, there is no fish there, but it does talk about other omega-3s found in plants. So that would be things like your flaxseed, chia seeds, and hemp hearts. So that's great. And then the last comment I just saw is that look for colorful foods, and absolutely make sure there's color on your plate at every meal. And as you can see, the pyramid here, the eating pattern is extremely colorful. That's great. And there's a comment here about being vegan and adequate protein. So I'll just say, if you can just flip it, if you could write that in the Q&A icon, we'll be sure to answer that at the end of the presentation. Great. So again, I want to thank everyone for contributing to the last few slides. I love the answers that came up. And when we're looking at all three of those eating patterns, the similarity across the board was focusing on including more whole foods. Right? Whole foods are unprocessed, which are naturally high in fiber. And fiber helps us stay full longer. It improves our blood sugar control and may actually help reduce cholesterol levels. Whole foods are rich in healthy fats. They have, there's very good evidence there that healthy fats can help manage our cholesterol levels. Whole foods are naturally low in sodium and rich in other nutrients like potassium, magnesium, and calcium, which have been proven over and over again that can help manage our blood pressure. And whole foods have no added sugar, which is good to help keep blood sugars as well as triglyceride levels in a healthy target range. So you see how simple it can be? If most of your foods are from whole foods, you are well on your way to eating heart healthy. So I'll take this next slide here. I'm going to start to discuss specific whole hearty. If I can just advance my slide here, one second. Sorry about this. Here we have oils. And as I mentioned, oils are from plants, so they typically fall within the bottom of the eating patterns that we've discussed. And remember, the bottom of those eating patterns are foods that we want to include every day. So oils are something we want to include every day. Now, there's very good evidence to suggest using oil is heart healthy, and you can use it, in your cooking, your baking, and even on your salads. The heart healthy literature suggests including oils that are rich in unsaturated fats and high in antioxidants, because the unsaturated fats have been shown to reduce LDL, or so-called bad cholesterol levels, and could actually increase our HDL, or healthier cholesterol levels. And olive oil is rich, as I said, in both the unsaturated fats as well as the antioxidants. So the Mediterranean eating pattern suggests including 3 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil throughout your day. So this is definitely not a low-fat diet, and fat is an important nutrient for heart health and should be included in every meal. So the next whole food we'll discuss are nuts. Nuts are a healthy source of fat, fiber, and antioxidants. When I speak with my patients about adding nuts to their eating pattern, the problem isn't usually about how to include them. It's usually that they're typically eating more than one serving. So a serving size is small. It's about 1/4 of a cup, or a small handful. If you're having something like nut butter, like almond butter, a serving would be around 2 tablespoons. Now, it's suggested to have a serving of nuts at least 3 times a week. And, nuts could be an excellent snack, or if you're finding it difficult to keep your portion to about 1/4 of a cup, then try adding it to a meal or snack. So you could, add it to your oatmeal in the morning. Now, fish. Fish was emphasized, as I said, in the Mediterranean and DASH eating patterns. Specifically, cold water fish like salmon, trout, mackerel, sardines have higher sources of omega-3s, and omega-3s found in food have been shown to reduce our triglyceride levels, inflammation, as well as blood pressure. So if you're following a vegetarian or vegan pattern of eating, make sure that you are getting enough omega-3s from your plant sources. As I mentioned, those are from flaxseed, We want to make sure that the flaxseed is ground if you're including flaxseed. Other sources would be chia seed or hemp hearts. Walnuts are also a plant food source that is high in omega-3. And I always remember this one because walnuts kind of look like a brain, and omega-3 fatty acids are also good for brain health too. So the recommendation here is to try to have 3 to 4 ounces of fish at least 3 times a week. And 3 to 4 ounces is similar size to a deck of cards or a calculator, which is featured here on the picture on the slide deck. So now I'm going to pass the presentation on to Fatim, who will continue to discuss other whole foods that should be included in your heart healthy eating pattern.
Okay, thanks so much, Veronica. So for those of you who were with us last Wednesday, you know we talked a lot about plant proteins and their benefits. If we look at a heart healthy diet, replacing some of your animal protein with plant protein will help lower your intake of those unhealthy saturated fats and also help increase your fiber intake. So you want to choose things like cooked dried beans, lentils, chickpeas, and tofu more often. If you're looking for convenience, you can also look for canned products and prepared soy products, but you just want to be a little careful with the salt or sodium content and look for products that are marked low sodium. So in terms of plant protein, a typical serving is about 3/4 of a cup of cooked beans or lentils or chickpeas. That's about 2 to 3 ounces of tofu. And we're aiming for about 3 servings each week. It's always a great idea to maybe try 1 or 2 meatless meals a week. And at the end of the session, I'll give you some resources on where you can find ideas and recipes. Okay, so fruits and vegetables are a part of any healthy diet, and we want to include a variety of either raw, cooked, fresh, or frozen fruits and vegetables each day. They're high in vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and also fiber. And you'll notice again all that color. So we want to choose a variety of different colors every day and fill at least half our plate with these fruits and vegetables. So that's equivalent to about 4 servings of vegetables each day. And a serving is about 1/2 cup of cooked vegetables, or for leafy greens like a salad, it would be a cup as a serving. And then with your fruits, you're looking at least 3 servings of fruit each day, a medium piece of fruit, or about the size of a baseball or tennis ball would be considered 1 portion. We go on to whole grains. These are an important part of a healthy diet. And you want to look for whole grains as opposed to processed or refined grains. So for example, looking for things that are marked 100% whole grain, like bread or cereal, looking for things like brown rice, quinoa, or barley. Whole grains have a lot more fiber, a lot more antioxidants and nutrients than processed grains like white flour. Now, in terms of quantities, we do want to make sure we include whole grain at each meal, but the amount would depend on factors such as your body weight, your body size, your activity level, and your blood sugar target. So that's more of an individualized goal in terms of quantity. And then if we go on to dairy and alternatives, as Veronica mentioned, these foods are a great source of calcium, and that's important not just for your bone health, but also for your blood pressure management. Dairy and alternatives may include things like milk, cheese, and yogurt, or alternatives such as almond milk or soy beverage. When you're choosing your dairy products, you want to look for lower saturated fat and lower sodium options. And we're aiming for 2 to 3 servings each day. So a serving of milk, skim or 1% almond milk or soy beverage would be about a cup or 250 milliliters. A serving of yogurt would be about 3/4 of a cup or 175 grams. And you want to try to stick to more of the unsweetened or no sugar added plain yogurts. And then when it comes to cheese, I know a lot of us love our cheese. A serving is about 50 grams or about an ounce and a half. And when you are looking at cheese, you want to look on the label and look for the percent milk fat or percent MF value, and that would be on the front of the package. And if you're eating cheese on a regular basis, you want to try to stick to cheeses that are 15% milk fat or lower. When we put this all together, this is what it looks like. And this is what is called the plate method. And what we have here is what the Canada's Food Guide shows. So following this plate method can help you plan a balanced, heart-healthy meal. What it suggests is that you fill half your plate with fruits and vegetables. And again, these can be raw or cooked, fresh or frozen, lots of color. You want to take a quarter of your plate and fill it with whole grains. So things like whole grain bread or pasta, quinoa, bulgur, barley, brown rice, or whole grain oats. And then the last quarter of your plate is the protein, and you want to fill it with foods such as chicken, fish, lean cuts of meat, your legumes like your beans or chickpeas, lentils, tofu, or soybeans. You can also include things like cheese and yogurt in the protein section. You balance your plate out and make water your main drink of choice, and that's basically what it looks like when it's a balanced, healthy meal. So this is something that maybe you want to think about when you're planning your meals for the coming week, and maybe think of ways that you can make sure that you have all three parts in the right portions. Again, the emphasis with the plate method and the food guide is to look for a lot of variety and to focus on making most of your plate filled with those healthy plant foods. Let's take a moment and let's talk about snacking. I know these days with a lot of us at home, we tend to snack a little more. In general, we still want to make sure we choose heart-healthy foods as part of our snacks. And we want to snack according to our body's hunger cues and energy needs, rather than just out of boredom or stress. So taking a look at these snacks that I have on the screen here, what would you add or change to make these snacks more heart healthy? And if you can type in your suggestions or comments in the chat box, I'll give you a couple minutes and then we can talk about them more. Okay, so I have one, add some fruit, which is a great idea. Change to fruits or veggies and a handful of nuts like almonds. Another excellent suggestion. Hummus, that's an excellent way to get in some of that plant protein. You can also dip some veggies in there. So lots of different fruits. I see blueberries, crackers and cheese for sure. You just want to make sure that you are picking the whole grain crackers. Carrot sticks, and you might actually dip those carrot sticks in some hummus. So great ideas. Thanks everyone for your suggestions. So with the examples I have up here, I know they're pretty popular. Sometimes it's very easy to grab things like a granola bar, but they can be quite high in added sugar. So you want to make sure that when you are choosing things, they're more whole and less processed. And then the other picture, when you're looking at things like crackers and pretzels, these can be low-fat options, but oftentimes they're made with the refined flour, so they're not very high in nutrients or fiber. So switching those out for something that's whole grain, adding some nuts and seeds, some fruits, those veggies, all excellent ideas. And I'll just end off and give you some resources. So we've mentioned these in the past. If you're part of the cardiac rehab program at UHN, you might have purchased the Eating Well for a Healthy Heart booklet, and you can look and find more information and ideas there. If you haven't purchased it, you can actually download it for free from the Cardiac College website, and it's a great resource on everything to do with heart-healthy eating. It covers everything from the Mediterranean diet to fat, to fiber, sodium, blood pressure management, and also talks about things to look for on food labels. We also have some great recipes on the Cardiac College website. you might want to check those out. So they include ingredients like fish and those plant proteins like chickpeas and beans. So those are great places to start when you're looking at planning your meals for the coming week. And then also if you're looking for ideas on, how to choose healthy foods, there are some great short videos on tips on what to look for. For example, how to choose a healthy legume or a healthy soy product, how to look for a healthy dairy or dairy alternative, what to look for when you're choosing fish. So lots of great resources on that Cardiac College website. Okay, so I see we have a lot of questions that have come in. So I think Veronica and I will do our best to tackle as many as we can.
That's great. Sounds good. I can start here, Fatim.
Sure.
Let's see, one of the questions here was about something I'd said. So flaxseed, why does flaxseed need to be ground? And we recommend grinding flaxseed because the ground form is a lot easier to digest. If we eat it whole, it actually just passes through our body, our intestine undigested, which means that it won't reap all the benefits, and it won't actually let our body get the essential omega-3s that we're recommending. So I hope that helps.
Great. So we have a couple of questions that have come in about seafood. So other than fish, so what about things like shrimp and other seafood? I have one question that these can be high in fat and not heart healthy. Can you clarify? So great question. So when it comes to foods like seafood, they can definitely be a part of a heart healthy diet. When we look at the fat in a lot of seafood like shrimp, the saturated fat content is actually quite low, and that's what really impacts your blood cholesterol. Although some of these shellfish do tend to be high in cholesterol, the research shows it's not so much the cholesterol in your diet that has a big impact on your blood cholesterol, but it's more of the saturated fat content. And that's why we emphasize eating less of the saturated fat, like the fat that might come from red meat or high-fat dairy. But when you look at other seafood and shellfish, it's actually quite low in saturated fat, so it can definitely be included as part of a heart-healthy diet.
Great, thank you. And there's a question here, is cooking with olive oil okay or not? And olive oil is definitely okay to cook with. It has a moderate smoke point, which means that, it can't be heated too high. But, if you wanted to cook with it, simmer or saute on the stovetop, you can definitely bake in the oven. I usually say about 350 degrees. That would be absolutely okay. So I hope that helps. Use olive oil when you're cooking, and also you can use it on your salads.
Okay, so there's a question here about avocados and good fats. So avocados are definitely a great source of the unsaturated fat. They have a lot of monounsaturated fat, which can help lower your cholesterol levels. So in terms of avocados, they can be, again, part of a heart-healthy diet. A portion would be, depending on the size of your avocado, about a quarter to half an avocado. And they definitely are filled with lots of fiber as well. So there's another reason to include them.
Great, thank you. And another question about oils here is canola oil just as heart healthy as olive oil? And based on the profile of canola oil, it is an oil that's high in unsaturated fats, and the unsaturated fats in olive oil have been shown to be heart healthy because it helps to reduce those cholesterol levels, our LDL cholesterol levels. So canola oil could be as heart healthy as olive oil. It just isn't researched as well as olive oil is. So that's why we did put the emphasis on olive oil. Canola oil also has the benefit that it does have a little bit of omega-3s as well. in its profile. So you're getting some of those essential omega-3s, that's good for our blood pressure, our triglycerides, and brain health, in the canola oil as well. So, yeah.
And then speaking of those brain healthy oils, there's a few questions that have come in around fish, and what types of fish should you choose, whether there's a difference between freshwater fish and saltwater fish, and types of fish. So as Veronica mentioned, it's the heart healthy omega-3s that we want to get from our fish. And generally, fish that come from colder waters tend to have a little more omega-3 than those that come from warmer waters. So you might choose fish like salmon or trout, mackerel or sardines. Any of those would be excellent choices. In terms of fish that you might want to limit or watch out for, would number one be things like your processed or breaded fish that can be high in added fats and sodium. And then there are certain fish that can be higher in mercury. And so you do want to limit those. And generally, larger fish tend to be higher in mercury. So for example, if you think of something like tuna, it's a very high mercury fish, whereas if you think of something small like a sardine or a trout, it's very low in mercury. So that might determine how often you eat certain types of fish. But I think all types of fish can be included. You just might want to focus on some of the smaller, higher omega-3 fish more often.
Awesome. And another question here says, I am diabetic and I need to eat more often. How can I make my plate? So Fatim had displayed the plate earlier in the presentation. And if you are eating more often, so instead of the 3 meals and you're eating 6 meals, I just say to break up that plate a little bit. So if you noticed, half the plate was vegetables, so you could have a quarter of your plate for lunch, and then the other quarter of your plate for your next stack of vegetables. So you just simply move some of the food that's on the plate to your next meal, basically, and you spread it over two times that you're eating, instead of just eating all of that food at once. I hope that makes sense. When you are eating your meals, you do want to include more than one food group, and that's why the plate is presented that way, that we're including some color, but as well as some protein and whole grains. So if you are splitting that plate to eat more often, I do encourage you to always try to have that color there, as well as either a protein or a whole grain with it. So always including at least 2 of those food groupings.
Okay, great, thanks. So another great question here. If you have a history of a diet that is very ethnic, is it a good idea to switch to one of the diets we've presented, like the DASH, the vegetarian, or Mediterranean? So I believe it is better to stick with one's culture's diet, and absolutely. So we really do emphasize that you stick to your own cultural foods and still have the pleasure of foods. And the beauty of some of these diets, like the Mediterranean diet, is that it can be adapted to any culture. So it doesn't mean that you have to eat foods that are from countries around the Mediterranean, like Greek food or Spanish food or Italian food, but it just means taking some of the concepts, like eating more of these plant foods and adapting them to your culture. So if you look on the Cardiac College website, you'll notice that the website is translated into several different languages, and within those, we've actually culturally adapted some of these diets and given ideas on how to include the foods you usually eat, but still stick to that dietary pattern.
Another question here reads, when following a vegan diet and performing moderate to high intensity exercise 5 days a week, how do I ensure adequate protein in my diet? Please note that I do not like tofu so much. So following a vegan eating pattern, you can definitely include enough protein from plants. You can actually exceed your protein needs with plants. You just want to make sure that you are eating plant protein at each of your meals, and you're eating a variety of the plant protein sources. So concentrated plant protein sources are things that Fatim had mentioned earlier, like your legumes, your lentils, your chickpeas, but also your soy protein. So soy protein isn't just tofu, but it could also be soy milk is a good source of protein. Also edamame is a nice snack. Or legume to try, and some chilies or bean salads, and tempeh is also an option to try. Other protein sources from plants, are your nuts and seeds, your nut butters, and whole grains like quinoa or steel cut oats could also be contribute to your protein intake. But I think the most important thing here is that you are including some type of protein source at each of your meals, and how much for you as a performing that physical activity, moderate to high. That's something I would say to talk to your registered dietitian about.
Okay, great. There was a question about organ meats like chicken liver. So with organ meats, they are both high in the cholesterol as well as the saturated fat. And we do know that they can raise your cholesterol. So we recommend that you keep those to just very once in a while or infrequently, and use more of the lower saturated fat options like poultry, just regular chicken or poultry, and the plant protein sources instead.
Great. Another question about oils here. How do you get in 4 tablespoons of olive oil each day? It seems high. And definitely 4 tablespoons of olive oil is something that Canadians don't consume a lot of, and that's why it is called the Mediterranean eating pattern, because it is found that the Mediterranean individuals living around the Mediterranean Sea eat about 4 tablespoons. So we're just encouraging more use of olive oil and not necessarily restricting our fats. This could be done, obviously on our salads, you could add more, but even when you're making something like a bean salad, making sure you're adding a vinaigrette to it. When you're roasting your vegetables in the oven, make sure you're adding some olive oil. It's just more about not trying to restrict the fat, and including it. And the recommendation there was 3 to 4 tablespoons. So you could suggest more, try to get up to the 3 tablespoons and see how that is for you.
Okay. There's a great question here on what is your belief on having a treat day or meal where you don't think about what you eat. And I think eating is a lot more than just looking at the nutrient content and how healthy it is, but it's also the pleasure and enjoyment that we get from foods. So we absolutely do promote that you have a balance, and it's, when it's a special day or a celebration, absolutely treat yourself, enjoy foods that you wouldn't usually eat. I think when it comes to nutrition, it's really looking at the big picture. And if you're eating well and choosing healthy foods on most days, having that treat day or meal once in a while is absolutely something you can fit in.
Great. And a question that's semi-related is we critically reduced our physical activity during this time. What changes should we do with our diet or eating pattern? And along the same lines as what Fatim was mentioning, we want to honor our hunger, but we also want to tune into our body to know when we're full. So physical activity, yes, does burn some calories, but it doesn't burn that much. And when I'm speaking to my clients about how much is appropriate to eat, I always encourage them to be mindful and maybe evaluate for themselves, do an assessment, I guess, for themselves to see how much food is appropriate for them. And, sometimes physical activity makes us hungrier. And very there's a lot of variables throughout the day. You know, staying inside perhaps makes us feel like we're in the kitchen, and food being around, we're eating more often. So that's why I would encourage you to think about your own hunger. Are you experiencing stomach hunger, and are you actually hungry when you're eating? And when you are eating, is the meal that you're eating satisfying you, or are you full because of it? And that will help gauge how much food is right for you.
Okay, maybe we'll do one more, Veronica.
Yep, that sounds great.
Sure. So there's a question here, what healthy food for eyes? So in terms of eye health, just like overall health, it's important to get in all the different types of vitamins and minerals. When we look at fruits and vegetables, it's especially the dark green and the red or orange vegetables that are high in vitamin A and different antioxidants that are healthy for our eyes. It's also important to make sure you're getting in that healthy fat and enough protein. So again, I don't think there is one superfood that is good for your eyes, but it's just making sure you get a good variety of fruits and vegetables. You include healthy protein and fats on a daily basis.
Awesome. Great. So as Fatim mentioned, I think that's all the time we have today for questions. But hopefully we did answer a whole bunch today, and we will include the answers to the remaining questions on our website in the next 48 hours. You can look there for your answers. Thank you for contributing, and thank you for tuning in today. I'll just do a quick plug for tomorrow's session, and that's to join Renee as she's going to speak about progressing your exercise at home. And I'll do another quick plug here that we are starting a women's series. So it's titled Women with Heart, which is launching next week. It will start next Tuesday, May 5th. And these sessions are going to occur every Tuesday. So the first session of each month will be a live online exercise class. And the following Tuesdays in the month will be women-specific heart education topics, such as menopause and heart disease. So you'll be able to join through the Cardiac College homepage, just the same way that you did for the current session today. And a new link will be there. I think it will be available on Monday. So again, if you're interested, we encourage you to join the kickoff, which will be next Tuesday. And that's when there will be 3 cardiac rehab supervisors leading you through a live resistance training session with our team. So I hope you can join us. Now that's it for today. And again, I do want to thank you everyone for joining us and contributing, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.